I would like to call the meeting to order at 10 a.m. I ask that as a courtesy to all that you ensure that you've silenced your cell phones. Also, I'd like to ask and to remind the directors to turn their microphone on each time they speak to help with the audio and video recordings. For the record, I'll note that the public meeting notice was properly posted as required by law, and the notice of this board meeting was provided to each one of the directors. At this time, I would like to ask Director Huber to deliver the invocation.
You pray with me. Our Heavenly Father, we're thankful, Lord, for the day today and this meeting. We're thankful for the beautiful rain that you've given us over the last few weeks and how it's benefited our basin and all of our customers. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to serve you through the board. And thank you for each of these board members who are not only colleagues but friends. We ask you now to guide us as we conduct the business of this organization this morning. Give us wisdom in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Directors Austin Ruiz and Tracy LaChance indicated that they would not be present for our meeting this morning. We've now reached the portion of the meeting where we've asked the general public to see if anyone has any comments. Those interested in providing comments by filling out one of the cards available at the receptionist desk will be called to approach the podium to make their comments at this time. I did not receive any comment cards, so we will move forward to the agenda. Item number 1, discussion and possible action on Texas Parks and Wildlife Department interlocal agreement and reservoir fisheries habitat improvement projects by Tiffany Malzahn, Chief Environmental Officer. Tiffany, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, I want to talk to you about a project we've been partnering with Parks and Wildlife for several years now that's been very successful, and it's time to re-up the interlocal agreement to continue. This project initially came out of our system operations permit process, some of the negotiations involved with that in Parks and Wildlife, and guidelines and requirements of the water management plan. So in our water management plan, it dictated that we come up with some reservoir fishery guidelines for duration of low water levels regarding drought times and impacts to the fisheries. We partnered with Parks and Wildlife. I guess maybe one of the few good things that came out of the 2011 drought was we actually got to observe our lakes under severe drought pressure and observe what habitat was no longer available for the reservoir fisheries. Out of that, we incorporated those guidelines and the obligation to work with parks to help us mitigate the negative effects on reservoir fisheries of prolonged droughts and low water levels. This is just an example of some of that work we did back during the 2011 drought. The one on the left is Lake Proctor when it's full, top of conservation pool. The middle one is where our operating guideline threshold is, that at which point we start to lose critical fish habitat for nursery habitat cover, protection from predation. And the one on the right is the lowest elevation that we experienced in Lake Proctor during that prolonged drought. And you can see how much of the water level or the water was just gone from that reservoir. So this left mainly just deep water with absolutely very little habitat to support a in-reservoir fishery. Here's some examples of artificial habitat structures. What we've been working with Parks and Wildlife is creating in those deeper waters artificial habitat that'll survive. So the next significant drought, there's already some structures that fish can use for cover, can use for nursery grounds, things like that. And this is just an example. Each reservoir gets, depending on what fisheries it supports, gets a unique strategy. We began our first partnership for actually installing habitat with Texas Parks and Wildlife in 2016. We re-upped that agreement in 2020. These are usually 5-year interlocal agreements. And that one is expiring at the end of this year, so it's time to enter into a new one for September. Like I said, we develop a unique strategy that's a collaborative effort between Parks and Wildlife Fisheries biologists and our BRA team for each reservoir, and then decide which reservoirs get done each year and what is the best types of strategies for each reservoir. And, that has really helped us create some things to mitigate future significant droughts. And it's something that the local residents, certainly the wide variety of fishermen across the state have received very positively too. I know we get a lot of comments that because we have an interactive map where we document each reservoir and where we're putting the structures, a lot of fishermen seem to enjoy that and like fishing off of them. And even though a lot of them are in deeper waters, apparently it's still having some positive benefits for them as far as recreation. And you can zoom into any one of the lakes and it gets much more detailed as you zoom in. This is just to show you we're just working on BRA system reservoirs. And so to continue the partnership would mean entering another interlocal agreement. We work with Parks $15,000 per year. We work collaboratively to come up with a plan. Then Parks does the purchasing and installation. Mainly they have the experience and the equipment to do that with. And this partnership has supported not only our water management plan, but our mission to protect water resources, strategic plan item 3B1, and it helps us proactively mitigate future effects of prolonged droughts on our reservoirs. Any questions before I read the resolution? Okay.
Thank you, Tiffany. Go ahead and read the resolution.
Okay. Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to execute an interlocal agreement with the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to perform fisheries habitat improvement on Brazos River Authority system reservoirs.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Wilson, a second by Jen Henderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone, Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Imbro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 2, discussion and possible action to declare surplus and convey to the city of Graham for public purposes real property owned by the Brazos River Authority in Young County, Texas by Randall McCartney, Regional Lake Operations Manager. Randall.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an item that has been through the Property Management Committee as well. It's in reference to some tracts of land that the Brazos River Authority owns up on the northern end of Possum Kingdom Reservoir, just west of the city of Graham. This was brought back in November, and we went ahead and pushed forward at the direction of the Property Management Committee to go back and go into detail a little bit more on the conveyance of this potential property. We're seeking to potentially convey this property to the city of Graham, and these tracts that are highlighted here. It's approximately 175 acres in total. And what I would like to bring y'all's attention to on this is up at the very top, you have these ball fields up here. This is Fireman's Park. And then down here at the bottom, you also have the City of Graham wastewater treatment plant. And these areas are going to be important here in just a minute on the next set of slides that I'm going to show you. But in the meantime, while we went back to go and reevaluate some of the reasons and justifications as to why we were going to potentially convey this property, we looked at different things such as easements, flood inundation areas, water quality, and things of that nature. Well, we went back and had a meeting with the City of Graham in February after that was brought to the Property Management Committee back in November. Today with us, we have Mr. Eric Garrity. He's the city manager for the city of Graham. Thank you, Eric, for being here today. He'll be able to answer any questions that are directed directly to the city of Graham here in just a minute. But again, those areas right there, if you'll please remember right up here and then right down here, and I'll show you how this creek at times will flood during just normal floods. Again, that top left picture are those ball fields, Fireman Park, that we had just pointed out. Just about 2 weeks ago, those same fields were inundated with water as well. The top right photo is the wastewater treatment plant, and then the two photos at the bottom are both images in between those locations. So that creek does get out of its banks just during normal floods. Again, this is just the FEMA flood map. It kind of shows the area of a 100-year flood, and these tracks are pretty much engulfed in all of those. So the land on both sides of the creek are owned by the city of Graham, and basically we have the stuff right in the middle for flooding. Here we go. Right here are some pictures of some of the risk that we run as the Brazos River Authority. If people illegally dump or anything like that, our team, our staff have to go back to remove the debris that's on our property down in the creek bed, and then dispose of that. And depending upon what that is, that could be hazardous waste or just regular materials. Currently, I believe there's some shingles that have been dumped on an area right now on our property, and I think a sailboat. So the team up there is working to try to remedy that. Again, we had met with the city of Graham back in February. We allowed them to indicate what they wanted to do with the property. Eric, if you would like to come up maybe and elaborate on kind of what y'all wanted to do with that. But while he's coming up here, the city's responsible for the survey of the properties and closing costs, retain restrictions and reservations. We're going to keep those. We're still going to be able to flood it, which is critical to our mission. They plan to use it, and Eric can elaborate on this here in just a minute, but they plan to use it for wildlife management areas and a green space, public recreation, and they can utilize that for hike and bike trails and whatnot. The Brazos River Authority, we still reserve all mineral rights, and we reserve the perpetual inundation easement, and then we'll have a deed to include automatic reverter clause, and we'll get into those in just a minute. But I'll let Eric kind of explain what their thought processes are and how they want to proceed moving forward with the property.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to appear before the board this morning. If you don't remember anything else I say today, I want you to know that we're united with BRA in preserving, protecting, and sustainably managing this area. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to have a designated green space on the western edge of the city. We feel in our negotiations that the proximity of the city, the fact that we're regularly out there at our wastewater treatment plant, we're better suited to manage this area and deal with some of the issues that were brought up earlier in the presentation. We think this is a chance for a great strategic partnership between the city and the BRA to make sure we preserve this beautiful area along Salt Creek for future generations. Be happy to answer any questions.
Could you go back to picture number, page number, I think 4, where you have a map? Right there. So the area that you're responsible for is going to be everything outside the yellow lines, is that correct?
No, sir. No, sir. What we're proposing to convey are these tracks, inside of these tracks here. Currently, the city owns the property on both sides of those tracks.
Okay. And then my second question is, and this is just a personal opinion, and I really appreciate y'all trying to do something to really make things good and attractive for the city of Graham. But I know how cities and developers always go hand in hand at some point in time, because you have to grow and you want to develop, make money, tax base. I just want to be sure from my perspective, my personal opinion, is that we protect as much natural habitat as possible around the BRA and not let the city 10 years from now, when you've moved on or whatever, and some developers come in there with some kind of scheme and a water park and God knows what else, you know, and of course, you've got all the protections in place, I can see that, so those are my concerns that I wanted to raise.
Yes, sir. So, Director Bourne, the reversionary clauses that we'll have in there, it protects that in instance like that. If the property ever ceases to be owned by the city of Graham, it reverts back to the Brazos River Authority. If the property is ever used for any other purposes than what we've agreed to, then it automatically reverts back to us as well.
Yes, sir, yeah.
So there's multiple reversionary clauses that we have here. If any city services are built on that aren't for just general maintenance of those trails and that green space, then at that point in time, we can take that property back as well. And if you want to talk maybe about the above-ground utilities, we're not going to allow any above-ground utilities, at least at this point in time, so if you want to talk that.
On the development question, just to kind of put a little more emphasis on it, you saw the previous map about the flood zone.
Yes.
Our assessment of this area and the area that the city owns on either side, it's essentially undevelopable, both based on previous agreements and then what we do here. You're just not developing in the flood zone anymore. It's not available for development. The other thing about utilities, we do have some underground utilities that run across Salt Creek to get to the wastewater treatment plant. The other thing is the city's utilities essentially end at Salt Creek except for that. So any future development to be able to expand utilities, we're going to have to go somewhere else to go even further west than this. So this seems like the ideal tract, right, to create this green space that no matter what happens 20, 25 years from now, it's still going to be green space right on the western edge of our city for the public to enjoy.
Well, I appreciate your commitment, and I just wanted, for the record, what you just said, so 10 BRA boards from now, if something ever comes back, for the record, we're there. We've made a mutual commitment, plus it's in, codified into everything we're doing here today, so thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you coming here.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bourne, and I just want to add, that Riley, you're here with legal, and I believe all the board has the same concerns in making sure that all of these things listed in your clause revert back to the BRA. We're not in the business of giving land to somebody, and thank you very much for being here. In 40 years, you're not going to be with the city of Graham, but somebody else is, and wanting to make sure that we're protecting the intent of our vote today. So I trust that, and I believe the board puts trust in legal to make sure that those components are taken care of.
So with
Director Giese has a question.
questions, yes, ma'am.
Director Bournes, if you guys do build something on there, are y'all gonna let BRA know before the fact, or is it gonna be built and then say, oh, well, we built this and it's already there, and then legal gets a lot more hairy when it's already there? Or are y'all gonna come to the BRA and say, we plan on doing this, because if it's not acceptable to BRA, it doesn't get built in the first place?
We were discussing that in the break between the committee meeting with Riley. We can put language in there. We had a similar agreement with PRA on some other property that was further east in the floodplain. And basically that language is in there that will limit the structures, exactly what type of structures could be put on there. We've mentioned the walking trails, which are relatively low impact, but anything else, if we wanted to do it, we would have to come back and get BRA's concurrence.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, seeing that there are no other questions, please read the resolution.
Whereas staff have developed with approval from the Property Management Committee a systematic methodology and process for internally evaluating real property owned by the Brazos River Authority to determine the best use of such real property and its applicability to the mission of the Brazos River Authority. Whereas staff have evaluated the following tracts totaling approximately 175 acres, which are located north of Possum Kingdom Reservoir on the west side of the city of Graham in Young County, Texas. PK 0259, tract ID 81-3-42, approximately 117 acres. PK 0039, tract ID 167-3-43, approximately 2 acres. and PK 0036 and PK 0371, tract ID 80-3-42, approximately 56 acres. Whereas the City of Graham desires the Brazos River Authority to convey the tracts to the City of Graham to be maintained by the City of Graham for environmental and public recreational purposes in the area. Whereas, based upon the evaluation, staff has determined there is no reasonably foreseeable need applicable to the mission of the Brazos River Authority to maintain ownership of the tracts, and that conveying the tracts to the City of Graham to be maintained by the City of Graham for environmental and public recreational purposes will serve the greater interest of both the Brazos River Authority and the City of Graham in regards to the use of the tracts. And now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager/CEO to negotiate and execute an agreement upon terms determined acceptable to the Brazos River Authority for the conveyance of the tracts to the City of Graham for so long as the City of Graham maintains ownership of the tracts and only utilizes the tracts for environmental and public recreational purposes.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion made by Director Huber, a second by Director Henderson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Parks,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 3, discussion and possible action on East Williamson County Water Treatment Plant Expansion Contract Amendment by Blake Kettler, Chief Planning Officer. Good morning, Blake.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. With this agenda item, we are requesting authorization for an additional amount associated with design changes, which will formalize through an amendment for the East Williamson County Water Treatment Plant Expansion Phase 2 project. As you may recall, staff coordinated authorization for a professional services contract for the expansion of the East Williamson County Water Treatment Plant back in January of 2024. This allowed for us to contract with CDM Smith as follow-up to their preliminary engineering report to perform the design and related services. We do have Alan Wilkie here with us today from CDM Smith as well. So I'm sure many of you, or some of you may remember this slide previously, but just a bit of background. As many of you are aware, we have been seeing substantial growth in related demands in the East Williamson County area. In order to stay ahead of the demand curve, we've assessed what upgrades to this facility were needed in order to keep up. The recommendations for the short-term expansion included re-rating the existing filters, which was complete in 2024. Constructing a 48-inch to 60-inch parallel treated water pipeline, which is currently at 60% design. Incorporating the Trinity groundwater well located at the EWC plant, which is approaching 100% design, and a 13 MGD or million gallons per day plant expansion of the East Williamson County plant, which to date we're at 95% design and rapidly moving forward. So the plant expansion itself is the main driver for the discussion today, with consideration given to the long-term expansion seen here. So here's an overview of the East Williamson County plant, with consideration given to a few components that are impacted by this request from the preliminary engineering report. So the existing plant is everything located within the green boundary. You can see, just to point out or familiarize yourself with a few of the items, you have your terminal storage located here. You have what was originally acquired, the east plant, as we refer to it, and then the west plant. In this area, some existing sludge lagoons, our clear well, and as we discussed on the prior slide, the Trinity groundwater well, which is a component of this overall expansion. In totality, the plant expansion included increasing the intake pump capacity, new terminal storage pump station, new clarifiers and filters, chemical system upgrades, additional ground storage, a new medium service pump station, 2 new sludge lagoons, and other ancillary components. The main driver for this request for additional funds is the acquisition of the adjacent property to the EWC plant here in Gray, located right there, which requires additional work to incorporate into the expansion as well as consideration given for future expansions. So this 28-acre tract was acquired around the same time as when we started design. So the request for the additional funds will be used to cover some additional services that were outside the original scope of services negotiated with CDM Smith. So you can kind of see the movement of the different components here. The slide that was prior was, this was prior to acquiring the property. Now that we've acquired the property and want to incorporate it into the expansion itself, some of those items have moved around and changed sides. So these include relocation, increased capacity of the sludge lagoons, increased ground storage capacity from 2 million gallons to 4.25 million gallons, a new maintenance building, and stormwater retention ponds. To design these components requires additional boundary, topographic, and archaeological surveying, geotechnical borings, utility relocation and permitting, THC coordination, and associated environmental assessment work. With that said, these additional services and use of the new property will provide added benefits and resiliency to operations as well as the expansion itself. It allows for more flexibility for this and future expansions with additional room to configure treatment components moving forward. Upsized clear well or ground storage, which translates into more treated water available when needed. Upsized sludge lagoons, so less frequent cleanouts, which will save time from an O&M perspective, and additional office space. The original office space was located here. When we acquired this 28-acre tract, you can see there was a barn dominium located there. That's recently been remodeled into additional office space. We were kind of getting cramped in the other office, so allowed the flexibility to expand the operations from that perspective, as well as release some other leased property or leased office space in the area.
We also closed our Georgetown office and moved our Georgetown staff to this facility to save money.
So this slide shows the original authorization that was received in 2024 with the proposed additional amount revised project total. So we came to you in 2024 and the original authorization was for the 15.4. We're proposing an increase of $300,000, which is less than 2% of the original authorization, for amended project total of 15.7. And I do have a resolution that I can read, but I'll answer any questions first.
Any questions for Blake? Director Bourne?
Could you go back to picture number 4?
Yes, sir.
Which one's the office, David? Is it the one at the bottom or the top right?
This was the original office up here. This is the, I guess, expansion or an annex of the new office since we acquired this property outlined in blue.
So if I'm a resident on the south end there, which way is the prevailing wind?
Well, this is a water plant,
Yeah.
so we should.
I'm looking at those lagoons. Okay. And you said this will increase it to 4 million a day?
It would increase, yes, it increased the clear well storage from 2 million gallons available to 4.25 million gallons. The overall expansion is a 13 million gallon per day plant expansion, but that just clear well capacity.
That seems like you're going to be coming back here pretty soon for more capacity, aren't you, probably?
You know,
The growth in Williamson County?
our expansion is pretty aggressive and will buy us years, but we will be back in front of the board in the next 5 to 7 years, starting another hydraulic study to look at the next expansion.
Yes, sir. So if you look at this slide here, about the time once we bring on these components here, shortly after, we'll be coming back to you to talk about the long-term expansion.
Okay, thank you.
Director Lattimore has a question.
Yes, sir.
CEO Collinsworth just mentioned that he had closed the Georgetown office and moved it over. Is the 300,000, well, let me back up. He mentioned we had closed the Georgetown office and moved it over. Is the 300,000 increase after the savings of closing that office, or is it in addition to?
No relation whatsoever. The Georgetown office was a rental facility
Oh, okay.
where we managed local meetings, and we had staff that did regional things out of that. So we just closed that office to save the $8,000 or $9,000 a month rent, and we're housing that staff here at East Williamson County now.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other question? Oh, Director Ember.
Yes, sir.
Like you mentioned that you guys have completed the preliminary engineering, and you're at the 60% now, right?
We are at 95% on the plant itself, 60% on the treated water line, and 100% on the Trinity well integration.
How does the acquisition of the land that you're referring to impact the overall planning of this?
So it actually provides us a little more flexibility. When we were, let me get back to this slide here. So when we were originally talking about the expansion, we were limited to everything inside the green fence. So we were going to have to be real strategic on how we place things in consideration of overall sizes. So with the acquiring the new property, we're able to expand some of those things, look at upsizing the sludge lagoons, the clear well, an additional terminal storage, long-term expansion. So it provides us a little more flexibility on where we can position those components to help us with overall upgrading of that plant to meet demands. Did that answer your question?
It did, but I have a follow-up.
Okay.
I guess what I'm hoping is that there's a plan to kind of reset and have a big picture plan so that you're not piecemealing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And that was the exact conversation on kind of how this all came together. When we acquired the property, kicking off design, it was like, okay, we need to pump the brakes. Let's look at this property and how it configures into not only this expansion, but where we're planning to move into the future. So those exact conversations.
And that's a great question. And when we bought this plant from the city of Taylor in 2005 and did this first expansion, the plant that we bought is in the barn. Everything that's outside was a BRA expansion. And you can see the clarifiers here, 1, 2, 3, and the way they're built. And that was designed in pipe so that we could build this way and have another terminal storage here and drill another groundwater well now that we have this property. So we do have a big picture plan on how we're going to get this facility to 48 plus MGD.
Wow, that's a lot.
Thank you.
That's a great question.
Director Huber.
Blake, where's the storage for the water here, like ground tanks or elevated or anything?
It'll be groundwater storage, so that's what we're referring to, the clear well. We've got one existing clear well there. We're going to add an additional clear well as part of this. So that's treated water ready to be
In a ground
shipped out.
storage tank?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Director Henderson.
So, like, will you go to the next slide?
This one here?
The original authorization amount, the 15 million, how far complete were we with that before we got the other property? Are we at like 95% done, all paid out?
We are 95% complete with design as of right now. When we acquired the property, we were just kicking off design. So we had basically finished the preliminary engineering report, the assessment with CDM Smith. We came and got authorization, and that's kind of when we incorporated the property.
So how much money have we spent out of that so far?
So out of that total, roughly 6.8 is design. There's also some TCEQ coordination, bidding, construction, RPR, a bunch of other things. So we're pretty much almost spent to that 6.8, not far from it. So it was the timing was crucial to come and get this amendment all squared away, so that way we could complete the design and keep everything on track and keep this project moving forward.
So does the addition of this increase, does it also increase the timeline as well?
Alan, you're able to answer that, but no, I don't think there's any impact to the timeline. That's been something on their radar, our radar, to make sure that we stay ahead of that demand curve and keeping up with the timeline in as far as when this needs to come online to meet demands in the area.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all for your questions. Blake, thank you for the conversation, and we all know East Williamson County is a huge growing part of our basin, so
Yes, ma'am.
thank y'all for staying ahead of the game there on the expansion. So, go ahead and read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager, CEO, to increase the total not to exceed amount of CDM Smith, Inc.'s East Williamson County Water Treatment Plant Expansion Project Professional Services Agreement up to a maximum amount of $300,000.
You've heard the reading of the resolution. Is there a motion to adopt? A motion by Director Wilson, a second by Director Henderson. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Abstain.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action on renewal Microsoft Enterprise Agreement by Luke Collins, Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah, so this is 3 years ago, we came up here before you and asked for a 3-year extension of a Microsoft agreement. This is just 3 years have already gone by. I know time flies fast, but this is all of our Microsoft stuff. The price is relatively stable. I'm asking for the same amount for the next 3 years, which is $1 million. This includes all of our Microsoft, all of our licensing, all of our applications that are with Microsoft, our workstation license, email, phone, server hosting, security tools, and a plethora of other apps and tools that we use. It's around a little less than, or a little more than $300,000 a year for the next 3 years. Cumulatively, I'm asking for $1 million. That's basically it. Just need to get approval from the board for the $1 million. Are there any questions?
It's nice, short, and simple, sweet look.
They told me to keep it
appreciate
short and simple.
You know what? It's the cost of doing business, and we all have the technology.
I will say this about the agreement. 3 years ago, I sat here and said that we were going to be migrating a lot of our systems to Microsoft Azure, and we were adding that. It saved us around $600,000 in costs, and between the labor and the costs that we saved of physical infrastructure, this thing has pretty much paid for itself over the last 3 years, and we're continuing to see a lot of cost savings. But essentially, Microsoft does these agreements every 3 years. They have an enterprise agreement. They require you to do a 3-year commitment. This locks us into 3-year pricing. And despite all the inflation and all the rising costs we've seen in technology, the prices have remained relatively stable. Also, we're grandfathered into some old licensing numbers that have kept our costs low. And so if we want to keep those, this 3-year agreement locks us into those.
Awesome. Director Embro has a question.
Yes, sir.
Quick question. You mentioned pretty much the same thing as what you asked 3 years ago. There's a lot of new products that have come out. Does the enterprise package that we're getting, does that include all new
Yes. So
products that comes along?
we have what's called a GCC 5 license for every member of the BRA. Every employee gets one. Every time Microsoft releases a new tool that's in part of that package, and all the updates to the existing ones, we get those included with this agreement. We get all the updates. So if we're on server version 2019 and it goes to 2023, we get that upgrade included in this, and every single patch that comes out for all of our servers, computers, and every Office application also is included in that cost.
And the AI components and all of that stuff that wasn't around 3 years ago were able to.
So the AI components, there is a part of what's called Copilot, which Microsoft is releasing their own AI version. There's a small component of that that's included with our license, but you don't get access to all the features. In fact, Microsoft's kind of separating all of those different types of Copilot AI. So they have one for development, they have one for servers, for example. We don't get access to all of those because they want an additional cost. We are adding 5 Copilot licenses for IT to test out. They're relatively low cost. And so I've asked for a little bit more room in case we would expand upon that later. But right now with where we are with AI, we want to make sure that it's safe for the BRA to use and test that out for at least half a year before we would add that.
Nice. Thank you. And Director Lattimore?
I kind of hate to uncork the genie here, but you mentioned that you were seeing a lot of cost savings. Can you just give us the high points? Obviously, you have looked at potential savings. Can you give us a little color as to what you're seeing as far as savings?
I actually have a slide for you. So I just kind of wanted to give you this is where our savings come from. All these servers cost licenses, they cost money, they cost time, power, all of those things to maintain. What we were able to do 3 years ago, I said we were going to migrate 70% of our infrastructure to Microsoft Azure. Well, we reduced our physical footprint to this. So this is where a bulk of those savings came from. It cuts down our labor hours. Now we're able to focus on operations. It actually gave us the ability to put redundancy and install a new network throughout our entire basin to where we have 2 layers of internet, for example. We have extra firewalls that we've now installed because of this. A lot of the savings went into investing in our operational infrastructure and security.
Very good.
Thank you very much. What I'm really interested in is more dollars and cents.
So this is the cost to on-site hosting to hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud means we still have to keep some sort of physical infrastructure. We have SCADA tools that have to be on-site. We have physical infrastructure at different sites, so we would call what's called a hybrid model. We'll never really graduate from the hybrid model because this gives us enough flexibility in case Microsoft shuts down. We actually have enough resources to absorb that here locally. And so if you can see, over time, the cumulative cost savings, start to really, really pile up.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I believe there's a resolution to be read.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors, the Brazos River Authority, hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to execute a contract with Microsoft for a software enterprise agreement having a term of 3 years and not to exceed the cost of $1 million.
All right, you've heard the reading of the resolution. Director Smith has made the first motion and Director Crone is second. Please pull the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Director Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren,
Yes.
Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Abstain.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Regretfully, yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Agenda item number 5, the Board of Directors will conduct a closed meeting and executive session on the following matters. A, pursuant to the authority granted by Section 551.076 of the Texas Open Meetings Act to deliberate one, the deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security personnel or devices, or 2, a security audit, and Section 551.089 of the Open Meetings Act to deliberate 1, security assessments or deployment relating to information resources technology, 2, network security information as described by Government Code Section 2059.055B, or 3, the deployment or specific occasions for implementation, security personnel, critical infrastructure, or security devices. If you're not specifically involved with the presentation of the first executive session agenda item, please excuse yourself from the boardroom at this time. With each executive session agenda item, time will be allowed to clear the boardroom and call the next presenter. We ask that the public please wait in the break room in order to keep the hallways clear until the executive session is finished.
All right, we ready? Oh. Wait for everybody.
Does anybody need to take a break before we start? Yes? Okay. We'll start in 10 minutes. Give us 10
10
minutes.
minutes? Okay.
Is there a resolution for the board to consider?
Be it resolved that the Security Committee, I need the new resolution. I need the resolution that shows the full board. One second.
Okay, there is a reading, resolution for the board to consider. Please read the resolution.
Be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Brazos River Authority hereby authorizes the General Manager CEO to execute a contract with Convergent Technologies for the installation and upgrades of security technology infrastructure not to exceed $1,193,000.
A motion was made by Director Savage, a second by Director Wilson. Please poll the board.
Presiding Officer Flores,
Yes.
Director Huber,
Yes.
Lloyd,
Yes.
Director Abraham,
Yes.
Director Boren. Director
Yes.
Ge- Director Geesey,
Yes.
Director Henderson,
Yes.
Director Jimenez,
Yes.
Director Crone,
Yes.
Director Lattimore,
Yes.
Director Embro,
Yes.
Director Parks,
Yes.
Director Savage,
Yes.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Director Taylor,
Yes.
Director Weldon,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Agenda item number 6, report and possible discussion on legislative update by Matt Phillips, Deputy General Manager. Matt, we've been waiting for this agenda item.
I feel so much pressure. Yeah, he's already given me. I feel like it's going to be disappointing, but I'll do my best. So there's 2 weeks left. They're almost done and hopefully done for good. Don't anticipate any specials, at least not as we sit here today. It's deadline time. You know, both the House and the Senate are running into deadlines to pass bills. And I say that as if both of them actually adhere to deadlines. The House does. The House has hard and fast deadlines. Like last Thursday was the last day for the House to pass non-local or non-consent House bills. The Senate does have deadlines, but they suspend them generally. You know, it's the old joke. The Senate has rules, but they just suspend them. So, you know, we're to the point where that sound you hear is the sound of bills dying. It's pretty much what it is. And depending on where you are, that may make you happy or it may make you sad. Last Thursday, the House did have their last calendar with non-consent or local House bills on it. It was about 30 pages long, I think, and I think it had about 400 or 500 bills on it. They got about halfway through it. So I think they probably left 200 or 300 on the table there. So those bills by procedure are dead unless they have a Senate companion that's moving over in the House or unless they resurrect themselves in the form of an amendment. Again, depending on where you are on those bills, that may make you happy or it may break your heart. But I could say that for the most part, it didn't bother us very much. So I'm going to skip to the stuff that matters more to us. My clicker is not working. Okay. So the one bill that we were interested in passing again this session is our aquifer storage and recovery bill for East Williamson County. We have moved that one along. It has been sent to the governor, so we were able to get that one started early. We moved the Senate bill just because it moved faster than the House bill. We actually got the House bill on the calendar and then substituted the Senate bill for it. It wasn't without a little bit of drama, I will tell you this. So In addition to our ASR bill, there was also an ASR bill filed for Medina County that would have done the exact same thing that we're trying to do. And that's not a problem. Love the folks in Medina County, but where it created an issue is they were amending the exact same section of the code as us, using the exact same numbering system. So had our bill passed and then their bill passed, there was a potential that they could have conflicted with one another by creating two new subsection I-4s in that section of the water code, one saying East Williamson County, the other one saying Medina. So we didn't want that to happen. We had a couple of different resolution ideas to fix it. We could have done a corrective resolution at the end of session. That's an avenue. We didn't really want to do that. We could have waited until the code correction bill next session where Ledge Council goes in and cleans up all the things that they screw up the session before. But what we ended up doing was just giving the folks in Medina County a ride on our bill. And so we just amended theirs onto ours. So Senate Bill 16, as it passed, includes both the ASR project for East Williamson County and for Medina County. It was the cleanest way to do it to make sure both of them can exist in statute together and not conflict with one another. So again, that little old bill just always has some sort of speed bump it's got to hit along the way. We don't anticipate we're going to have any problems this time with the governor's office. We're already talking to them. We obviously know its veto last session had nothing to do with the merits of the bill itself. So some success there. Water infrastructure funding. I wish I had some better news to give you on this today. I do have some good news, so let's start with that. House Bill 500, which is the supplemental appropriations bill, does include $2.5 billion in one-time funding for water infrastructure. So for all the new water funds they created last session. So that's the good news, that's the positive. What a lot of folks, including us, were supporting this session as well was included in HJR 7 and Senate Bill 7, its enabling legislation, and that was $1 billion a year in continued dedicated funding for water infrastructure. Both of those measures have moved. Neither of them are moving right now. There is some disagreement between the House and the Senate, particularly on HJR 7. And what they are disagreeing with one another about is not the amount. The $1 billion is the amount that would be dedicated to water infrastructure funding every year from here on in. What they're disagreeing about is the allocation of that money and the split of that money. So the Senate, some in the Senate would prefer to see that money split 80% to new water, big water ideas, water from other states, transporting water across the state, desal, ASR, while the other 20% would go to current Water Development Board programs like SWIFT and state participation. The House, as they pass HJR 7, didn't have a set split in the allocation. It just sent $1 billion to the Water Development Board for them to allocate as they see fit. They're trying to work it out. I don't know what that split will look like. Right now, HJR 7 is sitting in Senate committee. And again, we only have 2 weeks left. So it hasn't moved beyond that. It has passed the House, but is still sitting in Senate committee as they try to work out this difference that they have on what the split needs to look like or if there needs to be a split at all. It's kind of one of those scenarios with us in the water community that support dedicated funding for water infrastructure where, you know, mom and dad are fighting. And I think I'm just going to go to the next room and hope they work it out. We'll see how it goes. But I do, as we sit here today, if you ask me to handicap it, I think there's probably a 60 to 65% chance they pass this. But we'll see in the next several days how that goes, if they can come to some sort of agreement on what that split needs to look like. And then the financing of state water plan projects. This is where you can finance projects for 50 years instead of 30. That is moving. It's passed the Senate, passed House committee. I imagine that we will see it on the House calendar here pretty soon. Mind you, next Tuesday is the last day for the House to pass Senate bills. So we're running up to another deadline here pretty quick. So Senate Bill 1261 needs to find its way on the general state calendar here pretty soon if it's going to move. Surface water, there wasn't really much related to surface water except House Bill 2109. The whole purpose of that was to kick the Marvin Nichols Reservoir out of the state water plan. The folks that live in the footprint of that have hated that reservoir being in the state water plan and being a unique reservoir site for years. And the purpose of this bill was to kick it out of the plan. As it was initially filed, it would have also kicked several other reservoirs out of the state water plan, including Allen's Creek Reservoir, which would have negated our ability to receive state funding for the purposes of that project. They did substitute it in committee to exempt reservoirs that have been granted a water right permit as of September 1, 2025, which included Allen's Creek. So we were exempted out of that bill, but that bill ended up just passing House committee and never making it onto the last House bill calendar. So procedurally, it's dead. But it was one that concerned us as it moved through the process, obviously. Did a lot of tinkering around the edges on groundwater. Most of these bills don't do much. They just make some minor changes to groundwater law. The Groundwater Science and Research Fund is one that Texas Water Association supported, in that it provides funding, particularly for some of these small rural groundwater districts, to get more science. A lot of them don't have the infrastructure or the funding to do a lot of scientific research on the aquifer they manage, and so that's not a bad thing for them to get. So I think that one will move. It does not come with funding unless that funding is approved in the budget, and so we'll see if they actually get funding, but they're at least creating a funding program. Export permit notice, House Bill 1690 is one that requires more notice if you're going to go into a groundwater district and seek a permit to export water outside of that district. Pretty much expected that. There's a lot of controversy over export permits right now, so would expect that one to pass, and so we'll see where that goes. But again, no major groundbreaking legislation on groundwater this past session, just a lot of tinkering around the edges, which has pretty much been the case the last few sessions. Environmental. Some of these we supported. House Bill 517 was actually originated by the city of Georgetown. It prohibits homeowners associations from fining you or taking any action against you for not watering your lawn if your water provider has put you on drought restrictions. It's probably a good thing, and you shouldn't be punished for it if you're adhering to it. And so that one's moved and has been sent to the governor. We were concerned about House Bill 1674. That's the big PFAS bill that would have almost made land application of wastewater sludge impossible, if not so cost prohibitive that you couldn't do it. People understand the concern and why that bill was filed, but they also understand that the cost that would have come with that bill passing and the standards that it would have set would have been astronomical, particularly to some local communities. That bill did get a hearing, did not pass out of House committee, and did not make the last House calendar. So that one's not going to move. It was a good discussion. Obviously, there will continue to be research and work and discussions related to PFAS going forward, but probably wasn't the time to set standards in statute at this point, particularly not looking at the cost implications of that. Senate Bill 1, however, does include some language for a PFAS study conducted by the University of Houston in coordination with TCEQ. Don't know if that will make it into its final version of the budget. That was amended onto Senate Bill 1 in the House. The Senate and the House have very different processes with how they do the budget. The Senate passes the budget through the full Senate without allowing amendments, whereas the House allows the budget to be loaded down with amendments. They usually debate it for about a day and a half, and they just put so many amendments on it that most of them end up getting struck off in conference. That may be the case with the PFAS study. We'll just see how that one goes. Package plant restrictions, that was another bill that was originated by the city of Georgetown. It's meant to try to deal with the proliferation of package plants, particularly in fast-growing areas, so packaged wastewater treatment plants. It requires them to more aggressively look at tying into regional systems instead of having a bunch of package plants isolated in one or two areas because of the cumulative effects of their discharges. That was one that we supported, and so it is moving along. I think it will move through the House. I think they've found some compromise language with the development community that makes them okay with it, and so we'll see where that one goes. And then the rest of these are just minor bills related to composting facilities. Our only concern in watching them is whether or not they would affect us, because we obviously operate a composting facility at Temple Belton. None of them do. So those are perfectly fine moving forward. A lot of open meetings, open records, always tends to be. House Bill 111 concerned us greatly and a lot of other public entities. The way that it was initially filed, it would have basically taken away attorney-client privilege for the most part, in terms of having to release information under open records. It would have nullified the ability for you to withhold information if you're in active litigation. So your attorney-client privilege basically went away. I don't think that was their intent. They have substantively changed the bill as it's moved through the process to provide some exceptions to soften that language, so you could still withhold information, or you can still withhold certain information in terms of communications with an attorney if you're in active or anticipated litigation. And so we were glad that we were able to work with the author on that one to make it a little bit less broad, because it would have been a problem for several of us. Notice of open meetings, it will make us have to post our meetings a couple days sooner. Instead of 3 days, it's 3 business days. I think we normally post on Thursday, and the weekend is counted towards that. We're going to have to post our meetings a little earlier, and that's okay. I'm saying that because Lisa has to do it and I don't, so that's fine. A lot of broad public information law bills. House Bill 4218 I mentioned on here, that's the one that would have created a process by which you have to provide information, particularly if it's in the form of an Excel file or a spreadsheet or a database, in a format that's searchable and sortable. It might have created, or likely would have created, a lot of work for entities in responding to that. That one has not moved because I think a lot of concern was expressed in committee that one of the things you're not supposed to have to do in responding to an open records request, and Riley can correct me if I'm wrong, is create new data or create new documents. You're only supposed to have to provide the documents you have, whereas this process would have almost required you to do a bunch of work in creating new documents that didn't exist at the time you got the request. So I don't think that one's going to move. Senate Bill 986 is pretty interesting. It's meant to cut down on the amount of requests to the Attorney General to withhold information by allowing our attorneys in-house to make the determination on what we can withhold. Now, they will have to go through a training in order to do that, and it will give us the ability to decide when we want to withhold things and not have to hold up the release of information waiting on a determination from the Attorney General. So that's actually a positive one, I think. I say that again, not being the person that's going to have to do it. That'll be Riley's job, but I do think it'll be a good thing in terms of responding to requests more quickly. And then alternative newspaper posting, it allows electronic posting of open meetings, whereas now you have to post in a hard copy paper. It's getting with the times. You can post in an electronic newspaper, so it'll make that a little bit easier and hopefully reduce costs of posting open meetings for a lot of entities that have to do it like us. Contracting. We watch several contracting bills as we do every session because we're worried about what they will do to us in terms of how we contract, particularly for construction projects. House Bill 2960 is perfectly fine in its current form. It just makes provisions that require the litigation related to a construction contract. Right now, someone can put in a construction contract that if this goes to litigation, we're going to try it in Maine or New York, and it makes those kind of provisions void. We would never do that, but there are entities that do that, and it makes those void against public policy. So you have to try them in Texas, which obviously, and in the county where the construction project is taking place, which makes sense. House Bill 3223, and let me back up. Part of the only reason we were really watching House Bill 2960 and continue to watch it is because it is ripe for an amendment for Senate Bill 776, and I'll talk about that one in a second. House Bill 3223 reduces the statute of limitations for construction claims from 10 years to 8 years. I think that one is going to pass. I wouldn't necessarily sit here and say that we love it, but there's a lot of support behind it, and I just assume that it's 100% going to move. And sometimes when you're fighting battles on multiple fronts on some of these bills, you got to let some things go. And so that's one that we're probably going to have to let go. And then Senate Bill 776, we talked about this during the last meeting, would have prohibited us from having provisions in our contract that don't allow for monetary damages for delays. And it's something that we've always put in our contracts. We don't allow monetary damages for delays. It would have nullified our ability to do that. It would have taken it away. We actually testified in opposition to that bill in committee, not typically something we spend a lot of time doing, particularly since that bill is carried by a chairman in the Senate who is a good guy, and we like him and we work with him frequently, but we did testify against this bill. I think that between us and others that expressed the same concern, we cast enough doubt on it that it did not move out of committee. So it's still pending in Senate committee. For the most part, it is dead. I do not see it being able to move unless it resurrects itself in the form of an amendment to a bill like House Bill 2960. So we are watching all of that very closely to make sure that it does not move. If it does, we will continue to do what we do every session with this bill because it gets filed every session, and that is ask for a critical infrastructure exemption. So it will not apply to our major critical infrastructure projects now and in the future. We asked for that this session. We would have been fine with them moving Senate Bill 776 if they would have included that provision in there. They did not, and the bill did not move. So keeping an eye on that one still. And then others. House Bill 12. This is a fun one as of last week. So it creates a new mid-sunset cycle review process. You go through sunset every 12 years. At that 6-year mark, you would also be audited by the state auditor's office, and they would do an efficiency and effectiveness audit. So it's just another audit process. And the entity undergoing the audit has to pay for that process. We successfully convinced, on the House side, the author and the proponents of the bill that we are not like state agencies in terms of having appropriations. We are self-funded. We are not what they were looking for in this bill. They're looking at efficient spending of state appropriated dollars. We don't have those. We also reminded them that unlike every other entity that undergoes sunset, we have to pay for our sunset process, and this would be yet another audit that we have to pay for as well. So as that bill passed the House, it exempted river authorities that are under the sunset process. However, as it came out of Senate committee, they substituted it to make some other changes, and unfortunately, due to a drafting error, we are now back in it. And it is currently sitting on the Senate intent calendar. So we are working with the Senate sponsor. They admitted it was not intentional, they didn't mean to do it, and so our hope is it will be amended when it gets brought up in front of the Senate to take us back out and correct the drafting error that happened. If not, we'll see what happens, and if the House and Senate go to conference on the bill, maybe we can fix it then. If not, we can maybe try to fix it next session before any of that process would start, but we'll just have to see how that one goes. We were hoping that it would stay the way it was, but every now and again, Ledge Council, they're human, they make mistakes, so we understand how it goes. So House Bill 755 is one of the public funds for lobbying bills. It is limited. It does not include us. It is just for entities that tax or spend tax dollars. We anticipated that might actually end up being the vehicle for public funds for lobbying that moved. It is not moved. Obviously, it's still pending in House committee, didn't make the last House calendar, so by procedure, it's dead. So it's not moving. House Bill 3512, AI training, congrats. Y'all will now have to do AI training in addition to your cybersecurity training, as will all of us. We expected that to move. Senate Bill 14, we talked about last time. That's the Senate's big DOGE bill that has to do with regulatory agencies and how they adopt their rules. Does not apply to us because it's everything under the Administrative Procedures Act, which we don't fall under. And then Senate Bill 19, which was also expected to be the big public funds for lobbying bill, the broad version that does include us, still has a chance to move. Has not moved for several weeks because it's been over in the House for about a month at this point. It has not had a hearing and has not moved out of House committee. If it does, our hope that it ends up looking a little bit more like House Bill 755 and that it will be pared down to just those entities that levy or collect a tax or spend tax dollars. So with that, I think that's all I've got. You know, again, we're getting towards the end. We're watching for amendments. That's our best way to deal with things, but for the most part, we've had a relatively good session thus far, and hopefully that will continue for the next couple of weeks.
All right, Matt. Thank you very much. Always insightful. So I hope that we have an update on all of these in July. So
You will.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Michelle Drouar, you're going to be up for the next 3 agenda items. We're going to start with number 7, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget.
So I'm going to steal just a minute of her
Financial
thunder.
plan.
Oops.
I challenged Michelle and all of our managers going into this budget season. Let me back up. I gave the executive committee of the board a letter last year talking about efficiency evaluations. I didn't have a crystal ball that DOGE was going to become something. I just wanted to see how we could do things more efficiently. And I will report to you in July some of the things that we are doing and how effective I think it's going to be. And I think we're doing some really neat things, from project management to how we're looking at fees and such. But one of my challenges to them was to look at what we could do differently to save our customers money. And we're looking at that, and we always will. But what's running into us at the crossroads is inflation. And Michelle's going to show you some pretty interesting data that suggests that if we're going to do what our customers need us to do, and that's build billions of dollars worth of projects, we're going to have to continue to be very aggressive about rate making and money savings and doing whatever we can do to make sure when it's time to build $1 billion reservoir or a $150 million pipeline or a $200 million water plant expansion, that we have understood our financial components and how it's going to impact our bond rating, our cash flow, and everything that we do, and that's what Michelle is doing. So there's a huge challenge ahead of us. We've done a great job of keeping our rates low for our ratepayers, but the time is coming to where those rates are going to have to be increased pretty substantially so that we can do what we have to do. And that's the premise of what Michelle's fixing to walk you through.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Board. So yeah, it's time to take a look at the fiscal year 26 preliminary budget. We've been working on it for a few months now and kind of let you know where we are. It's kind of odd to be talking about fiscal year 2026 because when I got here, we're working on the fiscal year 2002 budget. And what's funny is I have people now working on this budget who weren't even in kindergarten in 2002. So it's making me feel a little bit long in the tooth there. But we'll start with our O&M budget. And the biggest part of our O&M budget is our salary and benefits, our people. So the fiscal year 26 budget includes an employment cost index increase of 2.5% and a merit pool of 3%. The employee cost index is a Bureau of Labor Statistics that we use that tracks not like consumer price index, or it's specifically to the costs of employing and retaining your staff. We're also looking at a possible health insurance increase cost of about 17%. The budget for 2026 includes adding 7 full-time positions. 2 of those positions are in our cost reimbursable operations, so those won't affect our system rate at all, but it is part of our total staffing. Our share of the O&M expenses for the storage that we have in the federal reservoirs for fiscal year 26 is going to be $5.2 million. That's actually a decrease from fiscal year 25 of about $700,000. So those are our major expense assumptions. Looking at revenues, we're expecting our non-system water sales to stay relatively level with prior year. The management fees that we get on those cost reimbursable operations are expected to decrease a little bit. We've had some major capital projects that we've been doing at those locations. A lot of those are wrapping up, so our management fee revenue is going to go down a little bit. We're also expecting our interest income to go down about $275,000. Mainly due to lower cash balances as we spend our reserves out on these capital projects that we're working on. And we're also expecting interest rates to come down a little bit. One of the things David talked about was our efficiencies. And so in F&A, with the help of some folks from John King's group, we're looking at all of our user fees. These are fees that are related to specific services that we provide. We're going to be looking at about half of them for fiscal year 26. We'll look at the other half for fiscal year 27. But for fiscal year 26, we're looking at our NSF fee, our airport hangar leases, our residential and commercial water permit application fees, the annual fees and the late fees, and also looking at possibly adding a certified mail fee. So we're looking at the staff time and the supplies and the other thing that goes into each of these services that we provide and make sure that we are charging the correct rates for these. And so we'll be coming back to you in July with the budget, hopefully with recommendations on changes to some of these fees. So now we're looking at our water sales and our long-term billing units and the average prices. And you can see we are suggesting a system rate of $106 for next year. That's right in line with what we had projected when we gave our 5-year projection last year. And these are our long-term water contract conversions. And so you can see what we go out here. The orange is our system rate. You can see, let's see, am I? Right there at the beginning, right there. Those dark blue, those are some utility contracts we have, 97,000 acre feet that are set to expire in 2030. And so in our long-range plan, we are planning for those to go to system rate contracts. This is a calculation of our system rate for fiscal year '26. And you can see our non-system water is going down a little bit. That's due partly to what we talked about before, less interest earnings and less management fees. Our O&M expenses are going up, and that is mainly due to salary and benefit increases. But our operating projects are coming down, so you can see our total expenses for '26 are going to be a little bit lower than they were in fiscal year '25. Our coverage ratio is going to stay level. We haven't issued any new debt. We're looking at adding a little bit more to our rate stabilization reserve, and I'll show how that comes into play later. And so it gives us a total financial requirement, and we divide it by the number of system water that we have in acre feet. We come out with a system rate of $106 for next year. This is just a graphic to kind of show for each acre foot and what you're paying for it, how that gets spent. And you can see the biggest part of it is going to our O&M. And then we have debt service, what's going to operating projects, our debt service coverage, and then lastly, our rate stabilization reserve fund. This just shows all of our lines of business for next year, including our cost reimbursable. And so since it's totally reimbursed by the customers, it doesn't give anything to our ending reserves. See, we're going to begin the fiscal year with about $100 million. We plan to spend about $86 million, $87 million of that on capital projects. We'll need debt funding of about $33 million, and that should leave us with ending reserves of about $50 million at the end of the year. So that's our O&M budget. Now we'll talk about our projects, and this is kind of what David was referring to. In looking at what we're budgeting for these, and we do go back and revisit these budgets every year, but there's a lot of uncertainty and volatility. We're still having a lot of supply chain disruptions. The lead time on a lot of the equipment we need, pumps, anything like that, can be from 18 months to 2 years. We're still having disruptions having to do with natural disasters. We also have disruptions, I guess, due to not keeping up with demand. There's been no new cement capacity production added in the United States since 2009. So everybody who needs concrete for their projects is seeing delays in that. We're seeing a lot of inflation, especially in the construction sector. Inflation in the construction sector is outpacing construction regular CPI by twice, 40% in the last 5 years. A lot of that's due to factors we talked about before, but it also has to do with rising labor costs and shortage of labor and lack of quality labor. And then last but not least, a large volume of these construction projects are in Texas. So we are all competing for the same limited resources. Data centers, all the other things that are being built in Texas, all the people moving headquarters and stuff to Texas. We're all trying to build stuff. So this is a look at our operating projects for the next 5 years. Operating projects have a definitive beginning and a definitive end. So they're not part of our recurring O&M budget. They do not create an asset for the most part. They're mainly studies, evaluations, things like that. We pay for those out of our current revenues. We don't pay for those out of reserves or debt. And so you can see we have about 5 million planned, and then we kind of taper down for a little while. We actually go to 0 in 2029, and then we kind of pick back up again. These are our capital projects. These are the big ones. One thing I'll tell you is that when we visit these every year, when we updated the budget for these this year for the same set of projects that we're thinking of undertaking in the next 10 years, the price tag on those went up 85 million just from one year to the next. And that's just based on what we know now. Most of these haven't gone into design yet, or they're in preliminary design. And one thing we know is we don't really know how much it's going to cost until the bids come in. And so at that point, we could be dealing with a whole new set of numbers. So we have kind of what we call our big three. We've got Bell House, we've got Allen's Creek, and then we have the three parts of the, I'm sorry, my handshake, the three parts of the EWC project that we talked about a little earlier. So in order to fund all those projects, we'll have to start issuing some debt. And so starting next year in 2026, we're looking at 33 million, but then you can see that ramp up over time to where we're pretty much funding most of our projects with debt instead of reserves. We're going to save reserves to try and pay for some of the smaller projects we have, but all the big ones, especially the big three that we just talked about, those are all going to be funded with debt. And so this shows us what our reserve balances will look like at the end of each year. And so we have, as required by board policy, we have a reserve, a contingency reserve. We have a self-insurance fund. We have 90 days of working capital, and you can see that green bar go up over time. And that's because as our O&M budget goes up every year, the 90-day reserve of that is going to go up. And then we have our rate stabilization fund. You see, we start off pretty healthy here, but as we start spending those reserves on projects and using it to stabilize our rate, those will go down also. And so this is kind of an example of what the rate stabilization reserve does. This is the rate that's calculated by our long-range model. And here I'm showing these are rate stabilization reserves that we're going to use. And what I mean by use is I mean we're going to take them reserves and we're going to count them as current revenue. And we're going to use them to offset the costs of some of our operating projects and other. So you can see we're planning on taking 6.6 million in rate stabilization reserves in 2026, and we're going to turn around and spend it or use it in 2027 to offset that rate by $14. And so this is the rate stabilization reserve we're utilizing. This is its effect on the system rate, and then this is the system rate that we end up with. And so this is the big slide. So you see this is what we're projecting for a system rate for next year. And you see how it goes up. The good thing is, if it's a good thing, the 204, when we cross the $200 mark in 2034, when we brought you this projection last year, that was really supposed to happen in 2035. So even with all this increased expense and inflation and uncertainty, we've really only moved the bar up 1 year. And hopefully we can keep it that way. But we're doing our best to keep these under 10% going forward.
Talk about your open debt market versus other opportunities.
Yeah, right now, because there's kind of a lot of uncertainty in the financing and what's going to end up. Right now, we're modeling everything as open market debt. And so if we are able to take advantage of some of the SWIFT funding or some of the other debt that's out there, it should help these numbers going forward. This is also based on 30-year debt, not 50-year debt. So depending on how, some of the stuff that goes through the legislature happens, it's nice to spread that debt out longer, especially if the asset you're building has a useful life of 50 years. It's kind of like you don't want to issue 30-year debt to buy, a school bus that's only going to last 10 years. You want the debt to at least be around as long as the asset. And so if that passes, then we may run some runs of the long-range plan and see how that affects things. So we still have a few outstanding items. We still have to have some budget meetings with our cost reimbursable customers. That doesn't really affect the water supply side, but it does affect the budget in total. We are still getting information, updated information on our operating projects and capital projects, and so that may cause us to go in and change some of those. We're going to have our annual water customer meetings in June and present them this presentation and the rate, and have all those items finalized and bring those to you at the July board meeting, hopefully for your approval. Any questions? Yes.
Yes. Director Lattimore?
The projections that you're showing, I guess, are based on current cost of money?
Yes. Our projections start with what we're looking at as our current budget. And then on the O&M side, we have inflators that we get from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for every category of expenditure, and we inflate that out over time.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not asking for any kind of hocus pocus or anything like that, but I would assume that somebody, maybe you or somebody in your department, is going to be looking and making sensible decisions about when to issue debt and watching the debt markets so that you're making the very best decision you can.
Absolutely. We will work very closely with our bond counsel and our bond advisors. I actually spoke to them Thursday and trying to plan a meeting once we get capital set to go sit with them and say, this is what we're planning on doing the next 5 years. Help us figure out the best way to issue debt and when.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Director.
Great presentation. Question, can you go back to the slide where you had the list of projects? The first slide,
This one,
the one before that.
this one,
Yeah,
the
so
operating project.
operating projects, are these the projects that are done in-house?
Not necessarily done in-house. Some of them, some of the labor might happen in-house. But these are mostly things that they don't create an asset. They're studies, they're evaluations, or smaller capital projects.
Okay. Where do you capture, because we've seen presentations where your staff has done some incredible projects in-house. Are those captured when you're doing the budget for the year?
Yes.
Those are
We have
captured?
what we call a direct labor matrix. And so we have our lists of projects and we have our staff and we show what projects internal staff will be charging time to. And then we track that on timesheets in actuality, so we can see our staff and how many hours they have dedicated to projects in-house.
Okay, so that is captured.
Yes, that
Okay.
is captured.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Director Jimenez.
Thank you for the information. My question would be about when we present to the customers in June, if we're going to do any comparisons maybe to the other water boards or anything like that.
The question was, will we do at our customer meetings comparisons of water costs with other organizations? We can do that. The problem is, it's really hard to compare apples to oranges because we all do things differently. You can compare our water costs to LCRA, but they have a take rate and a reserve rate. So you really got to get into a whole lot of the specifics about how they contract. So it becomes it becomes a very drawn-out process, but we can show you what other river authorities charge for raw water, but it may not be apples to apples.
Yes, Director Borton.
What is our bond rating?
Right now, we are AA.
Double A?
AA, and
Is it-
we're
and that's-
working.
A lot of that's based on how much we're keeping in reserves.
It's based on how much we're keeping in reserves. It's based on your ability as a board to commit to increasing water rates.
Right.
And it's based on also how we deal with the bonds that we have. We could get to maybe a AAA, but we don't issue enough bonds right now to get that far. So maybe as we issue more bonds and we make more payments and we have more revenue, then that'll happen, but.
So we required to keep 25% on a carryover balance a year. What's the rate, percent on that?
We have that 90-day, or like that
90 days?
90-day working capital balance.
Isn't that pretty high? 90 days seems to be unusually high.
No, that's pretty standard across governmental entities, is a 90-day or a 25% working capital balance.
Okay.
Director Geesey.
Dumb question, but so let's just say that we raised our rates to our customer, and one of them said, "Man, that's too high. I don't want to pay it." Who else would they go to?
That's a really good question. And, you know, the options that they would have are to not pay BRA for its water and give it back. Or there may be some cities that look at not contracting for as much. But one thing I assure you is that they will blame us when they go up on their water rates to their constituents. But that's a really good question, and very few of our customers have more than one water supply, one water source.
Yes, Director Weldon.
So, so if you go back to the previous slide, back up one more. Yeah, there. So there's not really a straight line here because there's a dip in 29 as far as the investment, though our rates are a straight line as far as the escalation over time. And my question deals more with us being able to describe to our customers why that rate is increasing at an 8% clip over time. That's a significant 10-year path. The investment in this infrastructure is a stewardship decision to sustain this over time. If it fails, it costs more than to fix it, to maintain it. So how do we describe to our customers that this is actually a timely and good investment relative to the condition of this asset? And if it's deferred, it will cost more to help justify the rate increase.
That's a great question. And a few years ago, we started focusing on our risk-based asset management, and we can sit with our customers and talk about how we're evaluating the risk of deferral versus continuing to do what we're doing. Director Weldon, to this point, we haven't had customers over the past 10 years that have really pushed on our rates. I think that as we top $100 an acre foot, we will start to see that, certainly in some parts of the basin. We're going to have to tell that story for sure and make sure that folks realize that if we're going to develop new water, our rates have to go up. If we're going to protect our infrastructure, and we've talked about this at other customer meetings, our newest dam is almost 50 years old. So we've been really proactive in trying to look into the future and understand what we don't know, because that's going to cost our customers money. So those are the conversations that we've had with customers, and we'll continue to have them. But it will become more difficult as these rates get higher, and inflation it's not just impacting the BRA. It's schools, it's government, it's you, it's me, it's roads, it's everything. So all this is going to be in the mix of burdening Texans on paying for these projects. We're very sensitive to that, and that's a great question.
And I want to just add to that, this board and members of the board previously have really focused a lot on infrastructure In our time on the board, I mean, there was a dam that fell down south, and so we know the consequences to people and neighbors and the community, et cetera, et cetera. It's a domino effect, right? So we have been steadfast and committed to making sure that the infrastructure of our dams are in the best shape that they can be for our residents in Texas. For sure. All right, yes.
I wanted to just make a statement. Director Giese brought something to my mind that, and then David's follow-up. The truth is, when our customers want to question the rates that we're charging, there really is no other provider of water for our customers. And if they want to question the rates, really what they're doing is they're questioning the stewardship of this organization. And their only ability to question that stewardship is to resort to a legal proceeding, which some of the customers have done in the past. So it is a very serious issue when we start. And for those of us that are comparatively new members of this board, when we talk about increasing the rates, we need to all think very carefully about doing that. And that's just me, who served on this board for a while, and some of the rest of you. But it's a huge issue, and the customers are not going to be happy as we see these rates beginning to increase. So that's all I got to say about that. Is
The customer meetings have been very informative to all of our providers. They have seen this projection, and so they have had a chance to get ahead and start planning with their customers. So while you jump over that 100 mark, it will ring some bells, but the team here has really done an excellent job in educating our customers that that rate is going up and what it means. Absolutely.
And I would add a second to that to say that our staff and our team here at the BRA has done a great job of controlling costs. And please don't take my remarks as being critical of them. I think they've done a great job.
All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 8, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2025, second quarter budget report by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer. Michelle.
Presiding officer, these are in your notes. If you have any questions, we'll answer them.
Any questions? All right, we're going to move on to agenda item number 9, report and possible discussion on fiscal year 2025, second quarter investment report by Michelle Giroir, Chief Financial Officer. And our information is in the packet. Does
Presiding
anybody have
officer,
any
the information is in your packet. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Anybody have any questions? All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Motion made by Director Henderson, a second by, we'll say Director Wilson.
Thank y'all for
All
coming.
in favor, say aye. We are adjourned. Everybody have a safe trip home. It is 12:26.